Hey everyone, Dreki here, and today we're looking at another camera. 4K 60 frames per second, $140 on Amazon. This is the Akaso V50 Elite. The V50 Elite is Akaso's best camera, and it has quite a lot going for it. Decent 4K with stabilization, acceptable audio quality, and a touch screen. So how does it compare to other cameras on Amazon? Well, at its price, there are few other cameras with this feature set. And in terms of video quality, it does pretty good for the price, so let's take a closer look at it. Included in the box with the V50 Elite is a fairly standard kit of action cam accessories: waterproof case, mounts, adapters, straps. Akaso gets huge bonus points from me though for including 2 batteries and a dual USB charger. There's also a remote which does voice controls, which is a pretty cool add-on as well. Build quality is identical to the original V50, plastic but solid enough to do the job. It's made out of this lighter grey plastic, however, that stands out among the other action cams I own. There's a bright silver faceplate on the front that advertises the cam as 4K 60. Sadly, it's not an extra screen, it's just a little silver faceplate. It also looks more or less identical to the original Akaso V50 as well as the DJI T5 Edge. As a result of the designs being so similar, accessories and batteries are compatible between these cameras. The way the camera looks isn't so bad, but I wish that the touchscreen extended across the entire back instead of having these huge black bezels. One thing I really appreciate about the design is how they kept buttons, so there's the option to use the touchscreen or the buttons to navigate menus. That way, if the touchscreen is inaccessible for some reason, like the camera's inside of its waterproof case or you're wearing gloves, you can still change camera options. The user interface on the camera is pretty straightforward too. It's kind of a standard user interface as far as these cameras go. To switch modes, use the front button or tap on video on the screen, and to enter the settings menu, press and hold the up arrow or use the gear icon on screen. I'm totally okay with this user interface. It's easy to navigate and all the settings are broken into fairly clear and concise menus. The only thing is, occasionally the touchscreen can be a bit slow to respond. And I also wish that the date and time didn't reset every time I pulled the battery, but aside from those little concerns, the UI is perfectly serviceable. There's quite a few customization options for things like white balance, color profile, all those sorts of goodies that you'd find in higher end cameras. There's even H.265 encoding, although that doesn't work at 4K with stabilization, nor does it work at 4K 60. This camera has tons of different resolution options, so let's start at the top end and go down. 4K at 60 frames per second. This is the highest resolution that the camera records in, and it does not have stabilization. To be honest, this resolution is not the greatest. I think that there's a trick being used to get 4K 60 on this hardware, which is easier to see if we look close at some freeze frames and compare it to the SJ8 Pro. Looking at these two freeze frames side by side, the SJ8 Pro, it's over sharpened, but it does have a lot of detail, especially around the shrubs. The V50 Elite is much softer to start, so I took it into Photoshop and sharpened it up. And with the two cameras at the same sharpness level, the differences are a little bit more obvious. The V50 Elite has lots of these squares from some sort of compression, or I'm not sure if that's from the video being resized from a lower resolution, but it just doesn't look right. Also, with 4K 60 you may find yourself limited in recording time by the heat that the camera produces. Inside of the waterproof case the cam does get quite hot, and I found it would pause recording until it cooled down. At least it does know when it's hot though, that way it doesn't overheat and burn itself out. While the 4K 60 is serviceable, I honestly recommend using 2.7K 60 instead. It's got more resolution than 1080p, and it doesn't have the compression noise that the 4K 60 does. There's also an unstabilized 1080p 120 frames per second mode that looks pretty damn great, as well as 720p 240. Akaso did not skimp on the resolution options here. All of those previously mentioned options don't have stabilization, so the highest resolution with stabilization is 4K 30, and I think that this is the best resolution that the camera offers. It has a lot of detail, bright, vibrant colors, and decent stabilization overall. On another positive note, unlike other cameras that Akaso offers, this one has a flat color mode, so if you don't like the default vibrant and saturated colors, then you can always switch to that instead. I'm actually very fond of the way that this camera processes color because it's so bright and vibrant. It's a little bit contrasty, which means sometimes white highlights or dark shadows get crunched, ending up pure black or pure white without much detail, But really, for the average consumer, a finished product video like this is a little bit better than video that you have to edit in post for the best results. Me, being a reviewer, I tend not to edit the color of my video, which means that brighter and more saturated color will look better to you, the viewer, over something that has more of a neutral color profile. This camera also offers 2.7K 30 with stabilization, as well as 1080p 60. Looking at 1080p 60, it's pretty good too, and much better than the original V50 was in terms of the actual details. It's got that same bright, vibrant color and a decent bitrate overall, so everything looks, well, sharp, accurate, really nice actually. It's also really cool that you can use the digital zoom while recording, even though you can't use it at the same time as image stabilization. In low light and at night, this cam isn't super bright, and that was a good rhyme. There is a little bit of noise to it, but there is one thing I really like about how this camera processes low light images. With image stabilization turned on, it locks the camera to a faster shutter speed, so there's no motion blur caused by the image stabilization. I still recommend turning the IS off, as the image the camera produces is much brighter, and it still isn't super blurry. There is also an auto low light mode, but that only seems to work in the 60 FPS settings like 1080p 60. Overall, this camera's not too bad in low light relative to other action cams, but like any action camera, it's still limited by the small sensor size and small lens, so don't expect miracles. In terms of audio quality, it's also pretty good. Just like the original V50, there's no setting for the mic volume, so just be sure not to talk too loudly, otherwise it will peak a little bit. But overall, for the most part, the audio is loud and clear. There's also a wind noise reduction mode, but that seriously reduces the quality of the audio, and honestly, it's not totally needed. There isn't so much wind noise on this camera compared to some of the other ones I've tested recently. So here's a sample of the audio quality outside of the waterproof case. Akaso V50 Elite 4K 30 with image stabilization turned on. Walking down the street at night here, and I mean, it's going to be a little bit shaky. That's just the way these things are. But as we're walking into the city center, I don't think it's going to look too bad overall. Hi everyone, Dreki here, and this is a raw video sample from the Akaso V50 Elite. I'm shooting at 4K 60 frames per second, and I'm uploading directly from the camera to YouTube with no editing. So hopefully this gives you a little bit better idea of the video quality from the camera. And finally, let's look at the still images. This camera claims that it can do 20 megapixels, but I doubt they're actually that high resolution. Most action cams like this are based on 12 or 14 megapixel sensors, so it's likely just an upscale, and that 20 megapixel number is to differentiate this camera from the lower end cameras. Nonetheless, the still images still do look decent with that similar vibrant and warm color profile as the video. Overall, not too much to say here, they're pretty good, they have some distortion, they're more or less ordinary action cam images, and they look pretty good in print as well. So in conclusion, this camera does have a lot of good things going for it. I've always had trouble recommending a camera in the $100 to $150 range from Amazon, so it's nice to have something that's, well, decent but not too expensive. Sure, maybe the resolution isn't as good as the GoPro Hero 7 or the Sony FDR-X3000, but those cameras are so much more expensive, and I think that this camera will be good enough for most consumers, especially because it has that brighter and more vibrant color profile than a lot of more expensive action cams. Let me know what you think of this camera. Subs and thumbs help out my channel, and as always, thanks for watching.